Now you would think after the end of the second one, after the end of Child's Play 2, where they literally melted him, that would probably be the end. But, as Chucky himself says, you can't keep a good guy down. So that brings us to Child's Play 3. Now, this movie was released in 1991. It was released 9 months after Part 2. Don Mancini actually started writing it before the second one even hit theaters. The studio was so confident in the franchise that they immediately hired him to start writing the third one. Even though he said that he didn't want to do it, he had no ideas. You can't rush something like that. They wanted it pumped out that quick. And in a lot of ways, I think that it really hurt the franchise. Not because the third one is necessarily a bad movie. I think it's the weakest out of the original 3. But it felt rushed. It felt uninspired. That's why they ended up taking a 7-year break after this one before they made another one. But we're going to get into that. This is my review of Child's Play 3. Now, to start off, I like that they did a time jump. They jumped ahead 8 years to where Andy is a teenager. He's 16 at this time. And he gets sent to a military academy. Because of course he does. Because this was the 90s. And everybody was sent to military academies in the 90s. It was a go-to. And in the very beginning of the movie, we see that Play Pals has started production on Good Guys again. And of course, the first one that gets made off of the factory line, of course, ends up being Chucky. Why? His body was completely destroyed. It wasn't able to be rebuilt like it was in the second one. It was his blood. Much like the Hammer Dracula movies. The key was in the blood. They picked up the melted hunk of plastic that was Chucky after they decided to reopen the factory 8 years later. They pick it up with a giant hook, and it bleeds into the melted plastic, and it gets poured into a form. So Chucky has a brand new body, which of course he does. He always gets a new body. It's actually the last time that he does, which is something that I like. And of course, you know, he starts killing people immediately. And he goes to find Andy, and he realizes after he does that he has a new body. He has completely been reinvented. And he doesn't have to go to Andy to get a human body again, because he can tell his secret again to the first person. Anyway, of course it's set in a military academy. Andy is the new guy. Andy is a troublemaker. Nobody believes him. Nobody wants to believe him. But I think one of the things that I really like was that he's not spreading it around. He's not talking about what happened. He starts to notice things that are happening, but he doesn't come right out and say, hey, you know, there's a killer doll on the loose that's possessed by the body of a serial killer. He doesn't come right out and say that. It's like he's trying to forget, even though he can't forget. And he's trying to just deal with it himself. He's trying to find Chucky himself and deal with it. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that they went away from that. He matured in the 8 years. He really grew up some. Anyway, the storyline itself, yeah, it's a little bit weaker, I feel. There's not as many kills. There's not as many true horror elements to this. This is more of kind of a weak action suspense movie, and I think you can really see the little amount of time that was involved in the writing process and the shooting. Even though, again, I still think that it's pretty good. It's still a Chucky movie. It still holds up. It's definitely the weaker out of the original three, and probably one of the weakest ones in the franchise. But even that being said, there are still some really amazing moments in it. The barber at the military academy is one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. He is hilarious. He is like, honestly, he's the one that Chucky should have chose to do a body transfer, to do a soul transfer on. Because this guy was like A plus 100% soldier. You know, he was the barber, and his brick wall in the barbershop is lined with medals. He's got a big army tattoo right here on his bicep. He's like, "Urgh," you know? And he's just so funny because of that, because he's so serious. Like, he walks around the mess hall while the kids are eating, checking their hair. Like, "How long has it been since you've had a trim, boy? I want you to come in Wednesday. You, Tuesday. I better be seeing you real soon." It's just hilarious. Sorry. The ending is very good. The idea of what they did with the ending, I thought, was really, really interesting. They used war games. They used the idea of the war games that they were playing, that they were having in the woods. The replacement of the paint pellets with live ammunition. Chucky kidnapping people, having a grenade. Two of the cadets actually dying. You know, it's just, there was some really good moments in there. There was some really good setup for something that could have been potentially really amazing. And I've heard that it was originally, the ending was supposed to just be that, and was supposed to almost be a bloodbath. But they didn't have time to get it all shot, and the studio didn't like it because it would have literally been a bunch of kids killing each other. And I could kind of see that, but this is also a horror movie. This is a Chucky movie. It's about a killer doll, you know? And that would have been really neat. Instead, they moved it away from there. There was only 2 cadets who died, and they moved it to a carnival, and the carnival ending is fantastic. It's big, it's flashy. They go into a tunnel of horrors, and that's where the ending takes place. And another very satisfying kill for Chucky. He literally gets thrown into the depths of hell. And I mean that literally. He gets thrown into a giant fan that's spinning with lights, and it's supposed to represent hell in this horror tunnel. And then, like, it just ends. It just, like, ends after that. Like, the people who are hurt gets taken away in the hospital, and Andy gets taken by the police, and, you know, his friends are like, "Are you going to be okay?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I've been here before." And then, boom, that's the end. You know, it doesn't drag out or anything. It just, like, "Oh, he's dead. We're done." You know, I liked the ending of it, but the beginning and middle is slow, and it drags, and there's some really pointless stuff, and it's just a showcase of all the worst things that the 90s had to offer in the way of teenage movies. It was just military academy, bullying, nobody believes you, stock characters, the alpha male character, his roommate is the nerdy kid who doesn't ever speak up even though he knows the truth. You know, it's just all the badass female that ends up being the new kid's love interest. You know, it's just all these kind of stock characters, and it just kind of dragged in a lot of sense. Like I said, it's definitely the weakest out of the trilogy, but it's still a pretty good movie. There are some solid moments in it. And maybe this movie was necessary in that sense because it allowed them to take a break and be able to reinvigorate the franchise. Even though the next two movies I'm going to be talking about are ones that I like the least out of all of them, it still breathes fresh life into the franchise, and this franchise evolved. You know, they evolved with the next two movies, and then they evolved with the two movies after that. So that's where we're going next. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry if this review was kind of all over the place, but I just didn't have a lot to say about this one. You know, it's just kind of the one that's there. There is something interesting that I noticed though that I wanted to share with you guys. I noticed a lot of correlations between the Chucky franchise and the Omen franchise, and I'm wondering if that's on purpose. The first Chucky movie, he's a kid, he has to deal with all this stuff. Same with the Omen. The second one takes place almost immediately after the first one, and he's still a child, and he's with a foster family now, and he's having to deal with all this stuff. Same as the Omen. The third one, he's a teenager in the military academy. Same as the Omen. And when he returns in Cult of Chucky, he's an adult. Same as fucking Omen. They're literally ripping off the Omen in some ways, except it's twisted around. But anyway, I don't want to say rip off, more homage. They're using the same setup. That's probably been used many times before, but it's just something random that I thought about. But there you go. That was Chucky 3. Child's Play 3. Stay tuned next time when we're going to get into the interesting 2 out of the franchise. Bride of Chucky. Chucky finally gets laid.